Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest studied at the International Institute of Chinese Medicine, where she earned her professional degree as a Doctor of Oriental Medicine, and where she also received a national certification in herbology. She began her career as an acupuncturist and herbalist, treating thousands of patients using traditional Chinese medicine and other cutting-edge alternative health treatments. She has spent the last 2 decades expanding her knowledge base and developing expertise in the use of flower remedies, homeopathy, reiki, guided meditation, and the use of other natural remedies for weight loss and beauty. Welcome to the show, Dr. Melissa Crum.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. Such an honor to be on your show.
Well, I appreciate that. I said before we began, we had a wonderful conversation, and I think we set the record of, almost doing 600 episodes here of the pre-talk. We had a nice pre-talk, diving down some rabbit holes, having a beautiful chat. But I'd love for you to just start us off with a little bit about your background, your work, and how you got into doing what you're doing today.
Yeah, so I am a Doctor of Oriental Medicine. So that means I'm an acupuncturist and herbalist for 23 years and had to practice, work with people. I still see some people. I did learn how to work with classical homeopathy as well as flower essence therapy. And I currently have a company called The Flower Remedy where I have some products that I make, and mostly the flower essences, they all have flower essences in them, which are really good for emotional balance. And so that is my philosophy that, that health begins with emotional, spiritual balance. You can't really have true health unless you have that. So that's how I really got into everything.
Well, I love that. That was a very short summary. When we started our chat, we were going into kind of like the Oriental medicine and the Eastern philosophy. And I shared a little bit about training with the Shaolin monks, and you could do an acupuncture class as a bonus. And I remember them taking out these charts about the energy body and thinking, holy smokes, like look at the detail on that. And they were talking about acupuncture, and they said, oh, well, if you have the flu, you put one here. And if you have a headache, you can put a point there. And I thought that is wild how detailed they have mapped out the energetic body. And as a side note, my ex-girlfriend in Whistler, she had a bad skiing accident when she was a kid in her teenage years, and she twisted her hip. And she had all the physical therapy, everything you could do under the sun to help her hip and her back, and it always hurt. And it was a doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture that actually did the trick of all the treatments, which I have always found fascinating to this day. I would have thought it would have been something else. So maybe you can kind of speak on that.
Yeah, so that's such great news. And I have seen that happen a lot of times where people have tried everything and then they go to acupuncture and that actually can sometimes fix it, and it's true. Everything is energy in my philosophy, and that's what when you said the Shaolin monks had the map of all of the meridians. So what happens is you have qi or energy that originates in your body, and it actually comes out as a pattern onto your skin. It's like almost like highways, energetic highways. And so that's how we can treat the internal by using the external, because that's where all your meridians, they're in very specific locations that relate to specific internal organs. And that's how you can correct the flow of energy. And once you have everything, flowing freely, your body it gets into harmony, gets into homeostasis and heals itself.
That's amazing. Well, we also chatted at the beginning too about germ theory versus terrain theory, and it's neat that you hadn't heard about that. So I'm excited for you to kind of dive a little deeper to learn about it, because it's exactly how you treat people. Terrain theory states that the body should be in homeostasis unless you're poisoning it or doing something, or the body's sending a signal that you need to self-correct. And if you're, if the body is as it should be, I don't know how to articulate that well, unfortunately. If your body is as it should be, everything should be functioning. It should be taking care of itself. You know what I mean? It'll be, doing all it needs to function at a high level. You're probably doing something to it that is causing this disease or this illness, and that sickness is a signal. So you got to get back to homeostasis so it can repair whatever's going on.
I mean, that's exactly right. That is the foundation of Chinese medicine. It's the foundation of homeopathy. It's the foundation of flower essences. Who knows what can get you out of balance, but when your energy is in balance, a lot of times it's diet, so many times it's emotions. And just living in the world. I mean, it's not a perfect world. We don't have a perfect diet. We have, every day stuff happens that's not ideal, right? I mean, there are many things that are great that happen, but there are things that can throw you off balance. And so if that energy gets, it's not flowing freely, then that's when you have this state of disease or beginning of disease. And so if you can correct it, from several different ways, but your body just can heal itself. But it is true. It's not, everything is internal, it's not because of, if you have a strong internal, you have strong chi and, good balance, then the external things don't sometimes affect you. Right. So
yeah, 100%. Everything you're saying just reminds me of training with the monks, and having that internal balance, right? It's kind of like what they teach you in martial arts. Somebody could bug you and try to incite a fight, but if you're balanced in the inner world, that's going to be very hard for them to do. You have the strength and the capacity, and also the inner training to know that you don't need to mess with that because you've done the inner work of, you're not defending your manhood, or like this idea that, hey, this guy's made fun of you, so you've got to go fight them. It's a very adolescent and childish thing to do unless you've done like the inner world, and like that's just ridiculous. Why would I even engage in that? And so that energy, I feel like it really can be powerful as you move forward, because you can think of an old man who's like a sage, or an old woman who's a sage and just has mastery. They have an aura about them, and I bet you it is an actual physical, measurable, energetic field that if we could see it, we would say, oh, holy smokes, they've done a lot of work to actually create this energy. They've done this actual work. And when I was training with the monks, there was one guy who could break with 2 fingers stone, and he could break bigger pieces of stone over each limb in his body. And he told me it was directing the energy. So it was an hour or 2 every day for years of his life, qigong, learning how to understand the energetics of his body, right? The energetic systems, and then conditioning the body as well, so that he could combine those 2 forces to do something that would be basically, to most people, impossible.
That's right. And I think we talked about it a little bit. That is something that he has spent a lifetime cultivating, his chi, right? And so we all have, we call it in Chinese medicine, we call it prenatal chi. It's chi that you were given, you were born with. It's almost like your genetics, right? And so that really is, you have this that you're born with that you can't really change that part of it, but you can change how much energy, how much chi you have by diet, by emotional balance, by doing things like qigong and inner work. And so that's so paramount for the monks. Like I said, it's a lifetime of work that they do, cultivating that chi and focusing it.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Just the lifetime of work. It doesn't happen overnight, right? We're in this culture now where everybody wants the quick fix. And the beautiful thing about the monks and people who have done the impossible is it shows you what's possible. But it doesn't happen overnight. I've been using the, strength analogy of squatting 1,000 pounds or deadlifting 1,000 pounds. Seeing a human being pick up 1,000 pounds off the ground is just absurd. No one should be able to pick up that kind of weight, but it'll be years and years and years of training that got that individual to show you something supernatural. Maybe you're not going to pick up 1,000 pounds, or maybe you're not going to use it to break boards like the Shaolin monks, but you could use that consistency to apply to anything else in your life that you had a passion for, a desire for. It shows you what's possible when you combine the inner world with the outer world. That kind of dedication, that kind of focus, and those 2 worlds need to come together for you to be functioning at your highest levels, and then to eventually do something that would be like impossible to you, which would probably be your dream, because you're seeing what's possible. How do I make this dream a reality? And I think those are two key components.
It's so true. And I know that when somebody does something that seems physically impossible, it's not just a physical thing, right? There's a lot of mental, emotional that goes into that, a lot of training, being tough and believing in yourself. And sometimes it's just like seeing that barrier. So when you see other people break the barrier, then everybody starts to do it, right? Because they see, okay, it's possible now.
Yeah, 100%. Like the 4-minute mile, one person breaks it, then all of a sudden everybody breaks it. I'm interested, when someone reached out on your behalf, it was the functional fragrances with flowers. And I had my friend, Dr. Nick, on about essential oils, which are wonderful. And he blew my mind about what essential oils were and how you could use them and all these different functions. I had no idea. I've got essential oils around me now because of all the great uses for them. And then you've dove into flowers. And I'm curious, like, is this a common thing or like, I had never heard of that. So I'm excited for you to speak about how you use them, the power of flowers. What is going on with all that?
So I really believe in essential oils too. They're great for so many things. And I think flower essence therapy is not very common, at least here in the US and Canada, but it does differ from essential oils because essential oils, you're actually extracting the oils, the volatile and the really concentrated oils from flowers and herbs, right? And flower essence therapy is actually energetic medicine. And so basically, they don't smell. They don't have a smell. They have the energetic blueprint of the flower. So they were created by Dr. Bach. He was a physician in the 1920s. He created the flower essences in the 1930s because he was diagnosed with a tumor, and he was given a very short time to live, and he basically got through it because he had so much important work. He was working on some vaccines in the 30s with. Anyhow, he just didn't have time and to die basically. And he realized that it was all the power of his mind and having a life purpose. And that's when he started really exploring flower essences. And he came up with 38 different essences to address very specific emotional imbalances. And so that's what they do. So just for example, there's a flower essence that's for guilt. There's a flower essence that's for, I would say, anxiety or fear, just generalized. And then there's one if you have like very specific fears. So as you can see, they're very specific in what they treat. When you think about most things that treat, emotional imbalances, they treat, just a very general thing, right? This treats depression. Well, what's the depression due to, right? And this treats anxiety. Well, what else is going on? So I'm not saying, don't use these other things. I'm just saying the flower essence therapy is great because it's very, very specific. I find it to be extremely effective, but it's subtle. It's subtle and profound in its effects. So.
Well, that's really fascinating. First, could you spell his last name for those who want to research this person?
Bach, and it's B-A-C-H.
Okay, that's what I guessed. And I wanted to just make sure if people wanted to check that person out. It's interesting to note that this is really about healing emotional imbalances. And in health, I've heard of many stories where people will have stored trauma. And then that's the part of their body that will get sick. Like there's one example I remember when I was going through some of this stuff, they had like a stomach ulcer. And then when the practitioner went through, and this was when I was studying NLP, I believe, and all my research kind of molded into one foggy memory. So please do your own research with everything I said. But the idea with this research was they went through the memory, right? And what happened is a very traumatic experience in childhood. And then the practitioner said, well, where do you feel that? When you remember that traumatic experience, where do you feel it? And they feel it in the gut. And this could be repeated over and over where people would have this memory and then it gets stored in the body. And I heard it said to me once from this very fascinating guy I was learning from. His name's Core Love, and he's just a very fascinating character. But he put it like this: he goes, your body's like a hard drive. Let's say it's got 100 terabytes of storage, and your memory is storing all that, right? So when you go about your day, it's just having little fragments of storage, right? Not too much. But when you have a traumatic experience, that's going to store like 50 gigs, 100 gigs of memory. And maybe it's going to store it right in your heart. Maybe it's going to store it in your stomach. Maybe it's going to store it in your back, right? And if you don't know how to circulate that energy or remove it or clear it, what's going to happen is it's going to become stagnant, and you're going to signal in the body that something's off. So it does seem like our emotions can actually cause illness.
I 100% agree with that. I don't, what you described was almost like a perfect description of Chinese medicine and qi. So you get some kind of injury, some kind of trauma, right? And it could be an emotional trauma, could be physical, but also the emotional comes with it, right? Fear or anger, whatever it is. And we have cellular memory, and our cells store those memories. And you're right, we can store it in meridians in certain parts of our body. And if you don't express it, which many times, there's not a place to express it, somebody doesn't know how to get you to express it or to work you through it. And that's when your qi stagnates, just like you said, and it can cause pain or it can cause illness. And so you really want to move that through, because if you don't express it, it gets stored. And that's when you can create a lot of, illness or disease down the line.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And so again, to go back to the flower essences, does he talk about how the heck he figures out which flower is going to help with which emotional issue? I'd love to dive into that aspect of it, and also knowing, which ones. I'm trying to formulate a question. What I'm thinking of is basically that most people deal with guilt or fear. We have these very common, challenging emotional states. A lot of people have anxiety and depression. And do you feel that these flower remedies can be used for all of those? And when they're used, does it get the person to a state where it really diminishes or eliminates those emotional states? Because I feel like most people that I coach or work with, or even within myself, there are certain negative emotional states that are repeated. And if they could be either heavily mitigated or reduced completely, that would be incredibly ideal.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And yes, so I'm going to go back to the first part was about how did he figure it out? I'm not so sure. I think it's with a lot of herbs, like how do we figure out that this works for this? Like when you think about Native Americans or Native people who've been using herbs forever, how did they figure it? I think nature tells you a lot. So sometimes you look at an herb and it looks like something. It might look like a kidney. It might look like a brain. And that's really what it actually treats. So walnuts, for example, that's not an herb, it's a food, but they're really high in omega-3s, and they're great for your brain, and they're great for your kidneys too. But so that's just an example. And so I think Dr. Bach was, it was trial and error. And I think also if you're really, really in tune spiritually, plants can talk to you. They could tell you what they're good for, what their intentions are. Let's see, there was another thing I wanted to address with you wondered if this could eliminate. So let's say somebody's dealing with something that's kind of stuck, or a stuck emotion, or something that they just are really having a hard time getting through. I believe that, yes, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. It doesn't happen like that, especially really old stuff, right? Maybe something since birth or something since you were 5 years old. It takes work. And the flower essences can really facilitate that. And even better is if you can work with a coach or a counselor or somebody, that can help you through that too. But
100%. And one thing I'm reminded of, and I feel so bad because I'm dropping her name now, but one of my friends, she is a Native American. She came on the podcast and told a story about her vision quest, and talked about how, you're out there with no food and no water, and And basically she was told that the plants and the earth would talk to her. And she goes, even for me, she goes like, I'm Native American, but even for me, talking to a plant is a strange thing. And, went through that process and ended up through this experience, really deepening her connection with all of plants and all of animals and all of the earth. And I know from my own experiences, sometimes through meditation, sometimes through plant help, that once I see that deeper connection with something as a living thing, something that can be communicated with, something that I'm a part of, that understanding never goes away. And I do see the similarities in my indigenous teachers and how they saw the earth and how they see plants and how they see animals in what you're saying now and how it can speak to you and grow a relationship. Because even with ayahuasca, apparently the shamans say that the plants, because told them which two you mix together, because one plant and one plant does nothing. You have to mix the two together, and then you get this incredibly profound experience. And it's psycho-emotional, healing, spiritual, it's everything. And so how would they know that if they didn't know that the plants were talking to them? And my final point to that would be, my friend Carlos Barrios was on, he's a Mayan elder, and he told me about this story about doing a summit of elders. And there was this very special suit, kind of like a super elder or just like the main guy. And he came and had a shower in his house, right? And he said he left his house and said, your water's dead. And he went outside and he, went in like the lake close by and bathed himself. And this person apparently lived in the forest basically most of his life in South America. And so what a difference of life experience, of perspective, of what you would perceive in your eyes and your ears and your senses from somebody who would remain full time in a forest living among plants and animals versus the city dwellers, which are constantly on screens, which are constantly distracted. It would be two totally different worlds of experience.
That's so true. And the knowledge has to come from somewhere, right? I mean, some of it's, it is, there's no other explanation. Some of it's divine, maybe. Some of it's, the plants, giving you the clues. And I think of like acupuncture when I was thinking, how do you explain this? How do you explain, how he knew which ones were which? How did they figure out like which acupuncture points treated, which conditions? It had to be, I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error, but there has to be something from somewhere else, or something from somewhere deep inside that knowledge that they possess.
Yeah, 100%. And, I'm going to say shout out to Sewa, because that's who, SEWA, that is my friend. She gave us an amazing podcast. If you want to check that one out, go back and listen to it because it's truly profound. So I want to make sure, I felt so bad at blanking. And so, okay, so with the flower essences, if we have these issues, we want to move through them. How does it work exactly? Can an individual just buy them and work through themselves, or should they go with a person? And like, what can they expect if they're going to be going on this journey? Because for someone like me, I'm going to look at the ones that I'm first going to take an inventory of the things that I feel the most. So right now I would say I have a pattern of maybe not depression, like I'll feel down about the state of the world. Like I don't stay there long, but it'd be nice if I were to eliminate that. And fear, in general, like sometimes I'll be fearful of maybe the state of the world for my daughter and some of the stresses that I have in my own life. So stress, I don't know if there's one for stress. So I kind of take that inventory for myself, and then I would get those and I'd want to work through those things to see if I can mitigate or release them completely.
So I want to just to work with what you told me and how specific they are, just to point out. So you said you have some, like, you feel down about the state of the world. So there are two flower essences for that. One is gorse and one is gentian. And gorse is kind of when you've lost hope. It's called the hope flower, right? So, and then you said, I worry about the state of the world for my daughter. So when you have excessive worry for your loved ones, that's red chestnut. So there's 3 essences that could be really helpful to you right there. And then like a generalized fear or anxiety is aspen. So that's 4. So you can definitely, people can definitely, do some research and treat themselves. You can go to a flower essence practitioner who can really hone in and listen to what you're saying and really do a specific formula. And then there are some formulas, like I do 4 formulas that are for specific kind of like the most common kind of issues that I identified. So there's a lot of things. You can go to the health food store, at least here, and buy flower essences. You can buy them online and you can make your own. And you do a treatment bottle that has mostly water, and then you do of each essence like 3 or 4 drops. And then you take 4 drops 4 times a day, and a dropper full maybe in your water bottle to sip throughout the day. And sometimes, you have that treatment bottle and you kind of work through that. And then you go on to the next one. You see what's still left, because like I said, it's kind of like peeling back the layers.
That's fascinating. I like how simple it is, and I'm definitely going to give it a try. I've read and done extensive study on Dr. Joe Dispenza's work around the placebo effect. And even if this was just a placebo, we know for sure it has a measurable positive effect. Now, I do believe in energetic medicine as well. So how it would work, I believe in that too. I would be curious, why do you think that this would work on an emotional level from your research in Chinese medicine, herbal medicine, and just looking at people? Because it really is, you can feel energetics. I remember studying with Michael Lozier, who's my first mentor. Shout out Michael Lozier. You're the man for helping me out. He wrote a book on law of attraction, and I was very fascinated on how to manifest things. And, he would say, the law of attraction matches your vibration, and the only vibration you can have is a negative or a positive one. And so we give the example of going into like a bar in the wrong side of town and you feel down, right? You feel the energetics of the room, right? That's essentially what it is. Or you meet someone, maybe you just meet someone for the first time and you feel really good around them. They are just so friendly. And you're like, man, I really like that person, that man or a woman. And you're like, I really like that person. Wow, they felt great. It's the energy they give off. And someone is depressed, or how they feel about something. There really is an energetic magnitude to an individual, and also to families and communities and even cities. This spreads out, and we can measure this energy as well. There are certain devices that actually measure the energetic field. So I wanted to prime the stuff that I know, and wanted to get your 2 cents on why you think that would work on an emotional level when people are using these things.
So I think it's because, I like to call it energetic or vibrational medicine. And one thing I want to mention about that I love about them so much is that because they are vibrational or energetic, they don't interfere with other medicines. So many people are taking a lot of other things, and so they're very safe. But the reason why I think they work is because I believe, like you said, people carry an energy, right? They carry a vibration. There's a blueprint. Have you ever been in a house or a room where there's nobody else there, but you walk in and you're like, this feels really good, or this doesn't feel great? Because you leave a blueprint. People leave their energetic footsteps in. And so that's what these flower essences are. They're very, very probably intricate blueprints of this energetic medicine. And I think it's Dr. Emoto. I hope I'm saying that right. He did the water. Do you know this? Is that his name, Dr.?
Yeah, Dr. Emoto. The first one is the one I'd butcher, but it's definitely Dr. Emoto.
Yeah. So he, they just talked to water, right? And said positive things, and then they took a photography of it and had this beautiful snowflake. And then they said negative things, and you could see this. It was almost like a black mass, right, of the photograph that they took. So I think it's very provable that energy is very real. And I've told people before too, like, hey, look, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? We couldn't see viruses, we couldn't see bacteria, hundreds of years ago. It still existed. People still got, sick. We just didn't know what it was. So
Yeah. And I when you say that, I just think about animals, right? It's very certain that you can communicate with animals, and dogs will know, like there's a quote out there, or just some dog owners know, is that if your dog doesn't like a person and it normally likes person, something's probably off with that person.
yeah.
And then how a person is with animals. Some people can, they have a calming energy and they can really be around all types of animals very easily. And other people who have a more scattered energy can cause chaos in the animal realm. And I know farmers that swear that if you talk to the plants and you love the plants, that they will grow faster, that they will grow bigger. They will swear on it like, their life depended on it. Like, this is definitely true. So it does seem to make sense. And when we look at spiritual teachings, I'm reminded of some of my Native American teachers where they would say, all of my relations, and that means everything, all of my relations, not, the rock, the plant, the animal, the other people, every single thing is all of it. Nothing is excluded. I am a part of this environment, every single thing. And I feel like in Western culture, we're very separate. This is my car. This is my house. This is my space. This is my job. It's like everything is, this is my sandwich, crow, bugger off. So, we're very separate that way. And if we have a more inclusive understanding of the world and what we're a part of, we can integrate into that better and find a little bit more balance.
It's so true. And the whole thing about the flower essences and Dr. Bach was, we are all connected. And so what he was most interested in was, is aligning the personality with the higher self and then with the divine. And so, the divine is, to some people it's God, to some people it's a, higher consciousness or collective consciousness. It's whatever, he called it God. But so that is the whole, this is everything that they encompass, and this is everything that they're about, and really truly the connection, if we can just believe and realize that we are all connected, and our energy affects all of those around us, and positively and negatively.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things that we spoke on before we started is the idea that you're not insignificant. I feel like our culture and some of the ideologies in this world make you think that you're insignificant, right? Like, you don't matter, your choices don't matter, your life doesn't matter, you're too small in this grand scheme of things to matter at all, to make a difference. And nothing could be further from the truth. And this doesn't mean that what you do will change the world, like you're going to end world hunger, you're going to stop human trafficking. And I'm just speaking from my own experiences. I want to end her. I want to, right. And I felt very insignificant because I really thought about what I could do to do that. And over the years, as I've potentially become wiser, but the jury's out on that one. I've just tried more things. I've come to understand that what I do in my world, with my friends, with my family, with who I am, I do make an impact in that world, and it is a meaningful one. And who I become and the work that I do and everything I put out there, it does impact a few people, but it most affects my family for sure. And that's a massive effect. And also, the most important thing is it affects me in my own life. And having many near-death experiences, maybe that's the whole point here, is for us to evolve, to figure out who we truly are, to make the choice toward good in our own hearts and our own minds, and not sacrifice our souls and sell our souls and really compromise who we are, as individuals, for some sort of materialism. It's always some sort of prize that will make you sacrifice. I think there's some sort of movie where the guy asks him, he's like, the question something like, how much did they pay you to forget your dreams? What was the number? He's like, what? He's like, how much did they pay you? And he's like, oh, it was, it was $1 million the first year. And then all of a sudden you get sidetracked. It's that material world where that spiritual inner world is you and your connection with your life, with your soul, with your creator. and how you move forward in that. And so I'd love for you to comment on that, but also talk about how, in your experience, how do we align ourselves to the higher self and divine? Because it's not an easy path to put that first over materialism, because we do have needs and we live in a material realm. It can be very challenging. It's not an easy thing to do.
Right. Well, I mean, I would say that I'm still probably figuring that out. But as far as what I think is that, first of all, when you say about being, feeling insignificant, I think we're so significant. We are so significant in our world. And I think of the ripple effect. So even if you think, I can't change the world, well, actually every, an act of kindness goes to the next person, goes to the next person. It can really magnify. So I think that's something to remember. And nothing really happens overnight, even our health, our emotional health. I think it's a continuous work in progress. And I think the way that we can stay balanced and is just to find what it is for us, to find what makes us happy. How can we show up in the world in a way that's really positive for yourself and for other people? And I just never stop exploring it. And also, I think not keeping an open mind, because there are a lot of things that we don't know that we don't know. Are there a lot of things that even, maybe I think I know, or I might say I would never do that. And then, 6 months later, I did do it. So, yeah, I think it's just to really trust yourself and just keep trying and always try to be better in whatever way that is.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just one simple one in there for me is just keep trying. And my daughter's 3 now, and it's interesting to watch her get better at things. And it's the whole thing about life is just continue to try. We're snowboarding, we're watching videos of me, and I take her skiing, and she's like, "You fall a lot." And I was like, "Yeah, I fall." It's like it's a part of the thing, And if she falls, she's like, "Oh, I fell." I was like, "Don't get down. Like if you skateboard, it's 90% falling, it's 90% failure. If you're trying to get better at something, you're going to fail a lot. It's a part of the process. It's a necessary and inevitable part of life. And reframing your perspective around it, if it's negative, is so imperative. You have to have a positive relationship with failure as just another attempt. It's either got to be nothing or motivating. It can't be defeating, because if it is, you're never going to succeed at everything. You fail until you get it. If you know anybody who's skateboarded, they probably try to kickflip 1,000 times, probably everyone 1,000 times before they got their friggin' first one. And that's a real, mostly accurate number, I'd say. It's so friggin' hard to get your first kickflip. And, it's very satisfying, but then you have it, and you had to work for that sucker. And, so it just really correlates to everything in your life. If you're trying to improve in your relationships, maybe you haven't had great success there, or your health, or these addictions. And that might be a good segue. Do you want to comment on my rant and maybe speak about flower essences if they help with addictions? I'm curious now.
I do think, again, maybe it's a piece of the puzzle. It could, everybody's different, right? But I definitely, if you can align yourself with your higher self, your highest self doesn't want you to be addicted, because that's not your highest purpose. And there's no judgment about it. It's just, if you can start to see, even just the possibilities, it can really help with that. And addictions, I think, are mostly trauma, right? Most people don't just become addicted. It's not fun. And it's painful. It's a painful experience for people, but it's numbing for the time being. So I think, that's the biggest piece. And so these flower essences, different kinds of therapies, can really help people to get back to their true self, really. And that's
I love what you said about the higher self. And it reminded me of the last podcast I did with Stephen Kotler. He's an expert in peak performance and all these different things. And one thing he said that stuck with me, he goes, "I work for the boss," which is his higher self, or his goals, what his mission, right? And so he's thought about and contemplated this mission and where he wants to go in his life and what's most important, and then schedules around it. And then each day he might not want to do something, but he's working for the boss who he knows has his best interest at heart. And I had never heard it phrased like that before. And I thought that was so great. And I was like, that's going to be helpful for me because one of the challenges I have is scheduling. I'm very big picture thinking, vision. I could find a million different ideas for any single thing, but to then be very structured, choose one and put it into a cat and then maintain it is very challenging for me. So with that idea, I think I can be a little bit more, what's the word, like functional or
like I mean, there are the big picture people, right? They're the ones who can come up with these great ideas. And then there are the people that can really implement the small details. I think I'm more like you. I'm more of a big picture kind of person,
yeah.
and
I
I'm
need all the
learning,
help
but
with planning and organization. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I'm also learning to bring people that can do that for me, right? Because I can't do it all. So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like,
Having a team is really huge, and having a community and people you can trust and building that is so critical for you in building these businesses, because you have a business, you have a successful acupuncture clinic at one point or still going on. How do you find balance in your life, and how do you help people if they're, have a family and a job and a career, the balancing health? How do you help get them in alignment?
so, I mean, it waxes and wanes for me, but I try to have a morning routine that really helps, and it's fast because I never feel like I have enough time. So I try to do a meditation in the morning. I try to do like small exercise, maybe if I can. And it's just I take flower essences all the time, and I'm always changing them for what I need. I think just trying to focus on being kind to myself and being kind to other people, that's really, I mean, it has to start with you, right? So that helps. And then when I'm trying to help people for health, I'm like you, I like the big picture, but I try to keep it simple, because I think if you throw 100 things at somebody, it's just far too overwhelming. So you kind of start with the basics, and you start with one thing at a time. And sometimes it's something simple, like start with something dietary that you feel is really impeding this person's healing and health. And then when they start to trust, and when the layers get peeled back, then you can start with, maybe emotional balance and doing things towards that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the big keys is just something very simple and very small and very manageable, not going totally crazy. And you could just look at, if it's diet, right? Label the 5 worst things you're doing, and can you mitigate one? Or could you improve one meal of the day, and then the next week 2? And just taking it in bite-sized chunks is so key, and understanding it's a process, and then being easy on yourself in the process, no matter where you're going. This applies for everything, whether you're trying to mitigate something and correct a behavior that you don't prefer, or you're trying to create a new behavior that you prefer to get you the result that you actually want. Going easy, going slow, but staying consistent and being kind on yourself in the process, that let it unfold at the speed it's going to unfold. And as long as you're showing up and putting in the work, you're going to get the results that you need.
That's right. And results are not overnight. It's a process, and the small things can get you really big results. And just doing one small thing, kind of, I've seen it open up possibilities for people, like they may have, let's say they just don't feel well. Maybe they're having weight issues, or, and sometimes that can really drag you down. It can drag your health down. And so they make one small change, and you just watch their whole world start to change. And it's not about the external. It really is, maybe it starts with that. Maybe it starts with, I want to lose weight, but really it ends with, I want to be fulfilled, and I want to really follow what my passion is, so that's fun to watch when people do that.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the reasons that may be is because we get stuck in these patterns. And when we're in these patterns, we can't see any possibility. And so once we can break one pattern, it now changes that whole internal world map that's kind of trapped you, right? You're in the cycle that you're stuck in. So if you can change one thing in that cycle, now you realize that other parts of that cycle can be changed, because you've done it once. So why couldn't you do it again? And so the first one is the hardest. It's just like getting back to the gym. They always say the first day is the hardest one, right?
Yeah.
It's just they start getting back into that and making that a part of your life. And so once you break that first cycle, your potential to continue to create and evolve is now at your fingertips, and you've got that momentum, you've got that energy, and you've got that inspiration to do it.
Yeah, it really builds that confidence in yourself, and it starts to make you feel good. So yeah, that's something that I really love to see when people, they start slowly and then it ends up being a really, big thing.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. I've loved this interview. I appreciated talking to you before the show. I appreciate talking to you during the show. Is there anything that we did not touch on? Is there anything that you'd love to discuss before we close our show?
I think we touched on a lot, and I just think, I just hope that everybody finds what works for them and what makes them happy. And yeah, I just can't really think of anything else that I'd like to say. I do have a discount code if anybody wants to check out my website for your listeners and users.
Well, I appreciate that. I will drop it. Well, say it, and then I'll drop it in all the show notes if people want to check it out. And then on the website, does it explain like how you use it? Because I'm definitely open for experimenting. I can see in the YouTube comments that somebody said that this is more common in Europe. And for those of you guys watch this on YouTube, my apologies for not being in the chat room. The problem is I can't look over in the chat room and focus on my guests. People are saying, why don't you go over here? It's because I can't do two things at once. That's why. So I appreciate you guys so very much, but I can't be over there chatting. But yeah, I will definitely post the code. Do you want to share it now? Is it ready?
Sure, yes. And it is true. Dr. Bach was from England, and so it's much more common in Europe, the Bach flower essences, and specifically in England. So my website is theflowerremedy.com, and the discount code that I programmed is MB for Matthew Belair for 20, M capital B 20 for 20% off your order.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, I'm going to get you to send me what you think I should and does it list like the emotions on there so it's easy to navigate, and then if you want to work with something, then you do. And that would be just as a good thing to do, a protocol for your journals. Like, look at your life. And this is something I do with my clients all the time, is I say, what are the emotions you're experiencing regularly that you don't prefer, that are negative on the Hawkins scale or negative in your body? Is it anxiety, depression, worry, guilt, fear, whatever? Most people have 1 to 4 of those. And on a scale of 1 to 10, there might be 8s and 7s and 2s. Even if you become aware of that pattern and you address it every day for a week, you will learn a variety of strategies for overcoming them or mitigating them. One of them is just becoming aware. Oh, wow, I'm in that anxious state again. Okay, well, let's just take 3 deep breaths. That's the first thing that I teach people to do. Once you feel it, notice it, take the 3 deep breaths. If you have, and this is what I like about the flower essences is in neuro-linguistic programming, you have a trigger or an external response, something to go with it, something that can go from negative to like positive. So, okay, I'm stressed out. Oh, I feel it. Well, I've got these beautiful chimes here. Okay, 3 deep breaths, ding a chime. Oh, wow, that's harmonic. That's resonant. That's beautiful. That brings me up. Now I'm in peace. Now I'm in the moment. And now each time you find that trigger, you're starting to nip the neural network. So if it's like an 8 out of 10, whatever this negative emotion is, and you experience it repeatedly throughout the day, your neural network of what will create this experience is big. So if you're a highly stressed person, right? You you get out of bed and there's a small thing over here and a small thing over there. Everything's going to start stressing you out because you are stressed. It's not the environment, it's you're a stress ball, right? Meanwhile, you got like this master monk whose house is super neat and simple, and he's moving with flow, right? And something happens and nothing really phases him because he's mastered his internal energy, right? And so the more that we can be aware of these negative ones and then shift our energy to peace and to contentment, we're going to start to break that inner neural map, and then it'll happen less, it'll be less intense, and then eventually it will just fall away.
So true. And you made a good point that, first of all, it's identifying it, right? Because a lot of times we're just kind of moving through and not even realizing you're being uncomfortable and you don't really know what it is. So it's true. If you can journal it or just identify it, that's the first step to addressing the problem. And the other thing is, when you talk about neuro linguistic programming, I'm not, super familiar with it. But the thing about the flower essences too is they set an intention. So you look at it, and not only does it have, medicinal, vibrational energy use, it has you do set the intention by, okay, I'm going to take this. It's got a positive name that it's called or whatever. And so that does help to push you along the way of balance and harmony.
100%. Yeah. And you're putting your intention to it, right? That's where it starts, is a recognition and then intention, and using all the tools available to make the change that you want. And also prayer is good too. There's no right way. There's no one way. Just use the ones, experiment, have fun, and do your best to love yourself as you are, first and most important point, and then just improve some of the things that you don't prefer to do.
Agreed.
Right?
Well said.
Good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed this. So people find you at your website. Is there anything else that you need to do to share, connect? You write blogs, everything's all over there.
Yeah. And I have my Instagram, and it's DrCrums, Dr. Crum's Flower Remedy. That's my Instagram handle. If you
I
want.
love that. Just sounds so friendly. Like I'm going to find your house in the forest and you're going to take care of me and give me a soup and some flowers. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming to the show. I appreciate you and your work, and it's been a pleasure.
You too. Thank you.
All right. See you later.